A healthy sense of adventure is something we all develop over the course of our lives. From a young age, a maturing mind is naturally inquisitive and desires to learn. But where we choose to take that sense of adventure is what differentiates us all. Some choose to pursue knowledge and wisdom to better their minds for themselves or others. Others choose to wield strength and power, whether it be physically or mentally, to control and influence the world around them. But regardless of our choices in life, to pursue one's goals, it requires overwhelming courage. The Legend of Zelda is a series that explores the innate courage each of us possesses. The central protagonist may change appearances and personality with each new incarnation, but a core part of its themes is the courage required to take action in life and explore the great unknown around us regardless of circumstance. Whether the path in front of us was of our own choosing or happenstance, the courage to see it through and the willpower to overcome any obstacle is intrinsic to the design philosophy of the series.
Hello, my name is Seth, and today I'd like to begin a journey with you all through one of my favorite video game series of all time. It's a series that I've grown up with and seen flourish in so many unique and special ways. One that's shown me the power of gaming as a medium through its storytelling, visuals, game design, and atmosphere. This is The Legend of Zelda.
One of the great joys in life, at any age, is discovery, and for Shigeru Miyamoto, that sense of adventure was the initial catalyst for his new action-adventure series. Along with Takashi Tezuka, the two had developed Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda simultaneously with two distinct design philosophies. Mario was to be a game based around its linear platforming action, which would occur in a strict sequence with little flexibility. The Legend of Zelda, by contrast, would be the opposite, where its non-linear nature and player choice would be its defining feature. When it comes to the narrative of this game, The Legend of Zelda is one of the more grandiose stories of gaming for its time. Inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, one of Tezuka's favorite stories, he weaves the tale of Hyrule, the Triforce, and the battle of good and evil over its unlimited power. A long, long time ago, the world was in an age of chaos. In the midst of this chaos, in a little kingdom in the Land of Hyrule, a legend was being handed down from generation to generation. The legend of the Triforce. Golden triangles possessing mystical powers. One day, an evil army attacked this peaceful little kingdom and stole the Triforce of Power. This army was led by Ganon, the powerful Prince of Darkness who sought to plunge the world into fear and darkness under his rule. Fearing his wicked rule, Zelda, the princess of this kingdom, split up the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 fragments and hid them throughout the realm to save the last remaining Triforce from the clutches of the evil Ganon. At the same time, she commanded her most trustworthy nursemaid, Impa, to secretly escape into the land and go find a man with enough courage to destroy the evil Ganon. Upon hearing this, Ganon grew angry and imprisoned the princess, and sent out a party in search of Impa. Braving forests and mountains, Impa fled for her life from her pursuers. As she reached the very limit of her energy, she found herself surrounded by Ganon's evil henchmen. Cornered. What could she do? But wait, all was not lost. A young lad appeared. He skillfully drove off Ganon's henchmen and saved Impa from a fate worse than death. His name was Link. During his travels, he had come across Impa and Ganon's henchmen. Impa told Link the whole story of the Princess Zelda and the evil Ganon. Burning with a sense of justice, Link resolved to save Zelda, but Ganon was a powerful opponent. He held the Triforce of Power, and so, in order to fight off Ganon, Link had to bring the scattered 8 fragments of the Triforce of Wisdom together to rebuild the mystical triangle. If he couldn't do this, there would be no chance Link could fight his way into Death Mountain where Ganon lived. Can Link really destroy Ganon and save Princess Zelda? Only your skill can answer that question. Good luck. Use the Triforce wisely. A gripping tale, originally told to players in the original English manual, complete with great art that I unfortunately can't find a source for. According to legendary Nintendo artist Yusuke Nakano, Nintendo would often outsource their artwork for games during the NES and SNES eras, which would explain why artwork from the same series could end up so inconsistent across various releases. While it's unfortunate that a direct name can't be found attached to these illustrations, I wanted to bring attention to the images, because I find that older game manuals are a lost form in the gaming landscape. Before graphics were able to truly render whatever we could conceive, we relied on artists to fill in the holes that limited displays on our televisions couldn't. If you look at Link's sprite in-game, he has a blank, empty expression. In the manual's artwork, you can see a bevy of emotions from determination, curiosity, ingenuity, and courage. These pieces of art are the first time we see the character of Link, and they do wonders for showing why he would eventually become one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. Another reason that Link is so iconic? He represents the link between us, the player, and the world he inhabits. While most players tend to stick with the canon name for the character, the appeal of the legend is that the name of the hero is whatever you want it to be. If you want the hero to be named after yourself, a loved one, or a silly name, he can be. Hell, they can be. The character designers at Nintendo designed Link with an androgynous enough design that if you want your hero to be male, female, or non-binary, there's nothing stopping you. The Legend of Zelda has always been based on the player's own experiences at the end of the day, and how you react to the world around you. Don't let a silly thing like canon discourage you from playing how you want. Once you boot the game up, the player is greeted with one of the most iconic musical pieces in gaming history. A piece of music that almost didn't exist. Believe it or not, Koji Kondo and Nintendo were going to use Maurice Ravel's Bolero as the title theme, but had to change it late in the development cycle after learning that the copyright hadn't expired for it. As a result, Kondo wrote a new arrangement of the overworld theme within 1 day. 1 day. I know when it comes to procrastination, the joke is that only intense pressure can create diamonds, but good grief. There's cutting it close, and cutting it close while simultaneously creating history. Good stuff, Kondo-san. Now then, with all the preamble out of the way, we can jump into the game proper. At first glance, Link appears a bit ill-equipped to take on the Prince of Darkness, holding only a shield. Not even a weapon. Not to worry, that can be quickly remedied by venturing to the nearby cave to find an old man who entrusts Link with a wooden sword, the first of many weapons on this journey. From here, the world is our oyster, a first step into the Land of Hyrule, a legendary place full of wonder and... Okay, so Hyrule in this game is a bit hard to traverse. First off, Link controls like a tank. He can only move in 4 directions, and he can only attack in the direction he's facing. Doesn't matter what weapon he's holding, he can't attack from behind or to his side at all. It makes combat in this game very awkward because it feels more like a game of Snake when you need to hit enemy weak points by shuffling around and poking at them. It feels less like you're actually sword fighting and more like you're sluggishly stabbing. This can be mitigated if you're at full health, because you'll be capable of firing a magical beam from your sword that hits as hard as a standard swing. But there's 2 issues with this strategy. 1, you have to be at full health to use it, and staying at full health in this game is easier said than done. And 2, the movement of Link means your shots need to be planned ahead of time, because he stops in place with every swing, meaning if you don't know the enemy patterns, you're more than likely getting hit and losing the laser anyways. It's a tool that can be incredibly effective, but it requires more skill than the average player would have to hit its maximum potential. And the game doesn't really get any easier if you try to brute force it. You could very easily get lost and end up in areas you aren't supposed to be in, and waltz into dungeons you aren't capable of beating, whether through lack of skill, equipment, or both. The game attempts to help you keep track of where you are through a map on the top left of the screen, but that really only shows you a relative position that might as well not mean anything to a first-time player. Where are the dungeons, the shops, the secrets? None of that is marked before or after you find them, so it's up to you to mark it all down. Or you can do what every sane person does and simply look up a map online or in one of the many officially licensed guides that Nintendo has printed over the years. I personally use Zelda Dungeon, a website that is absolutely spectacular for taking you step by step through this dangerous and uneven terrain that is Hyrule. Without them, I can imagine my playtime would have been astronomically higher than it was, because while this game's map is not incredibly large, its lack of visual clarity meant that I was often using the same routes to get to and from places to avoid getting lost, even with the map I had on me. I found it easy to stick to the outside edges whenever possible and only go off the beaten path when I knew that there was an item, because otherwise I was risking getting turned around or inside out by enemies way above my pay grade. Fortunately, thanks to the non-linear nature of the game, if you know what you're doing, have a guide, or just get plain lucky, you can find plenty of tools in the early game to make your life significantly easier. Before I even touch a major dungeon, I find the blue candle, white sword, magical shield, and blue ring. Without even mentioning the 3 heart containers, bombs, and rupees, by the time I consider going into the first dungeon, I have a very capable and frankly over-equipped Link. The Eagle, our first dungeon in the game. The atmosphere is distinct from the rest of the game. They are underground layers of evil that house the 8 pieces of the Triforce, with Ganon's forces furiously foraging for its power to grant their master. Enemies like Gorias, Kesses, Stalfos, and Wallmasters are all here looking to turn Link into a fine paste before Ganon even realizes he's coming. When it comes down to it, this is par for the course in a fantasy adventure setting, but what makes Zelda as a series so iconic is that Link is the lone adventurer on this quest. Instead of a paladin, wizard, and ranger who can handle specific tasks at hand for a party, Link starts his quest naked and slowly but surely grows into a capable and competent combatant in many forms of fighting. This first dungeon, while extremely easy and made easier by my over-preparation, grants Link access to the bow and boomerang, the former being an essential tool for taking down faraway threats, and the latter being less significant in this game but would stick around to become a series staple. After an almost perfect run of the dungeon, we come face to face with our first boss, a fearsome and terrifying dragon, Aqua... Oh, he's dead. Yeah, unfortunately, if there's something that this game doesn't handle very well, it's the bosses. I'll discuss it more as we go through the game, but Zelda 1's stiff combat doesn't allow for the most engaging boss fights. Aquamentus is a boss so easy and pathetic that it's almost comical. Even if you come into this fight with nothing but the scraps on your back, his attack pattern is so simple that I struggle to call him a challenge. The next dungeon, the Moon, features an upgrade to the boomerang that allows it to travel further. You'd think for the dungeon boss it would help us at least a little bit, but no. The Dodongo does not attack you. At all. It simply wanders around the rooms it's in, seemingly indifferent to anything that you do. You can try to swipe at it, but it won't do any damage. Now, as a longtime Zelda fan, I know that typically the best way to beat a Dodongo is to feed it a bomb and stun it, freeing it up for damage. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do here. But the game's idea of telling you this is through an old man that simply says, Dodongo dislikes smoke. If I didn't know any better, I think the way to defeat him is through smoking a pack directly in his face. Honestly, the hardest part of his fight is just dropping the bombs in front of him without him turning away or into you. Hell, you can see in my fight with him that the only reason I win is because I managed to stun him with an explosion instead of him eating it, and my white sword managed to one-shot him. Otherwise, I would have been out of bombs and out of luck. The third dungeon in the game, the Manji, is where we get introduced to one of the more annoying enemies in the game, Darknuts. They walk around somewhat aimlessly, but are completely immune to attacks from the front. You have to get really close to them and hit their sides or backs, otherwise they won't take damage. While they aren't much to talk about here, as they die in one hit to a bomb or two to my sword, it's later on where they get ever-increasing health that turn them from annoying into outright threats to my physical well-being and sanity. Manhandla is our third boss, and the first true test of skill in the game for me. The creature has 4 heads, and a central body that lurch around the arena, firing projectiles as it does. There are 2 ways to handle this fight. The first, and more challenging way, is to use your sword and attack the heads one at a time. While the projectiles it fires don't prove much of a challenge at any point, it's these projectiles combined with the constant movement and high contact damage, and Link stopping on a dime when swinging his sword that cause this strategy to go from sound to stupid. However, there is another way. If you place a bomb on the ground and attack the heads, they die instantly, and if you can place a bomb perfectly, then you can kill Manhandla in one shot. It's very difficult and something I wasn't able to do, but it is possible. The 4th dungeon, the Snake, doesn't prove to be much of a challenge, nor does its boss, Gleeok. The only warning I can issue is that the magical shield doesn't block the projectiles thrown at you, so dodging is your best bet if you want to keep your laser beam up for the fight. Not that you need it, I just opted to slam into it really hard and lost only a couple of hearts for my troubles. With half of the dungeons finished, let's take a break from dungeons for a bit to discuss the Land of Hyrule in some greater detail. You might notice I haven't talked about any major NPCs, or towns, or true landmarks yet, and that's one of the more interesting things about this iteration of Hyrule. It's very desolate. Like the game manual says, the Land of Hyrule was already in chaos before the start of this game's events, and Ganon's arrival only exacerbated the already fragile state the kingdom was in. That means that Link is primarily alone on his adventure, only meeting a couple of brave souls willing to sell him items or grant him new weapons. The land is primarily populated with monsters, and while those monsters are out for your blood, there are a couple of things said monsters can drop to help you on your journey. 2 of these are series staples, hearts and fairies, that will heal 1 heart or 3 respectively. There's also one of the more obscure items in the entire series, the clock. Pick one up, and it freezes all enemies on screen. It's unique for sure, and far more gamey than every other item in this game. Link is no stranger to manipulating time, but it's typically meshed into the lore a bit better than clock that stops time. There's a reason this item never makes another appearance in the canon Zelda timeline. One of the most important places on your map is an old woman that will sell you potions, a blue one that heals your health bar fully once, and a red one that does it twice. I highly recommend getting access to her as soon as you can, because having that insurance for a dungeon run can bring you huge peace of mind. The overworld as a whole, despite its desolate nature, never feels bleak. I credit that to Koji Kondo's excellent and jaunty overworld theme, one of the most recognizable video game songs of all time. The soundtrack, while small, is nothing but iconic, if a little repetitive. I personally love the intro and credit themes, but there isn't a single track I would classify as bad. They all do their jobs wonderfully and help spark life into the adventure in different ways. On that note, we head to Dungeon 5, the Lizard. This dungeon is where we get acclimated with some enemy types that will be annoying us for the rest of the game. There's the Darknuts upgraded blue cousins that have more health, making them more aggravating to take out efficiently, and the Pulse Voice, which is a strange enemy that bounces around fairly quickly and does significant damage if they touch you. This seems like a decent spike in difficulty for only the 5th dungeon of 9, but if you play the Japanese version on original hardware, you realize that these enemies can be easily defeated without moving. Simply shout into the microphone on the Famicom controller, and they'll die.
Ja, kaniner. Ja, stora öron och mat. De måste höra riktigt mycket. Skriker vi här. Kolla, kolla. Det tål de inte.
Here in the States, we don't have a microphone on any version of the NES, so we have to kill him the old-fashioned way, with long-ranged arrows or sword strikes. I will always recommend arrows if you have the ammo because it keeps you out of danger and can even clear multiple of these guys at once. Meanwhile, your sword takes multiple hits to clear these guys, and with their constant bouncing can result in you taking a lot of chip damage. It's not a pleasant time, but fortunately these guys are only seen in a couple of places in the game. The dungeon's boss is called the Dig Dogger, and while as a boss fight it's nothing special, it could be argued as the first traditional Zelda boss in the series. Why do I say this? Its major weakness is the item you find in the dungeon, the recorder. Play it, and it causes the Dig Dogger to lower its defenses, allowing you easy pickings to sweep it away. Not hard, but I distinctly remember my reaction as a kid to figuring this boss out, because it reminded me of the more modern titles I had been growing up with. The 6th dungeon, the Dragon, is notable for one single reason. Wizrobes. These are by far the most obnoxious enemies in the game. Unlike Dark Nuts, which are lumbering and easily outmaneuvered if you play patiently, Wizrobes will teleport all over the place and attack you with ranged magic from afar. If you can't reach them or get caught swinging wildly, you'll more often than not eat powerful magic to the face, and that can get extremely exasperating. Fortunately, the dungeon boss, Goma, feels pity for us and is a piece of cake. While your sword can't damage him, his attack pattern of firing a single projectile at a time while not moving too close means you have plenty of time to sit back and wait for him to open his eye. Once he does, shoot him with one arrow and bam! Nice and simple. This next dungeon might be the most inappropriately named dungeon in the game. The Demon is a dungeon that features some of the most basic enemy types in the game, rewards you with an upgrade to the candle that allows it to be used multiple times on the screen, and features Digdogger and Aquamentus as boss fights. If you've made it this far into the game, none of this should prove a challenge for you in the slightest. But if you thought the game was going to take things easy on you, strap in. These next two dungeons are not only some of the most difficult in the game, I'd argue they are up there for the most difficult in the series' history. The 8th dungeon, the Lion, is a brutal final test for the Triforce, throwing a ton of enemies at you in rooms that don't give you much wiggle room to maneuver. This was a hard wall for me as a kid, and even now in this current run I lost right at the end against the Gleeok rematch. With a quick run back against them, I come out victorious, and finally complete the Triforce of Wisdom. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend doing any cleanup of the overworld before you go to Ganon's lair. Unlike other later games in the series, getting 100% in this game is not an insanely difficult challenge or time sink. If you're missing out on any heart containers or need to stock up on bombs, arrows, or potions, do that now, because once you go into Death Mountain with Ganon, one of you won't be leaving alive. Death Mountain is not called that lightly. The only location in the game to get its own unique theme, if your skills and understanding of the gameplay are not top-notch, you will suffer greatly in this dungeon. The sheer amount of enemies thrown at you in tight spaces, walls all over the place that aren't clear which ones are bombable or not, and two very important items for making the rest of the game easier, one of them required to be Ganon. It is not an exaggeration to say that if you get to this dungeon without a guide and are playing blind, you will spend hours, possibly days, attempting to beat this dungeon. It is a gauntlet in the truest sense, never once letting up on you for even a moment. Even after collecting the red ring to redouble my defense, I was still taking plenty of damage from the hordes of Wizrobes, Bubbles, and Patras. As mentioned before, one item in this dungeon is required to beat Ganon: the silver arrows, an upgrade to your regular arrows that the game does tell you about earlier on in the 5th dungeon. But it's vague, and if you aren't aware of the silver arrow's existence, you have no reason to assume a regular arrow isn't what he was talking about. It's unfortunate, but it's moments like this that make me always recommend to use a guide when playing this game, or at least have one on hand just in case for a moment like this. Thankfully, after a grueling journey through the belly of the beast, we reach him. This is Ganon's final stand. Upon entering the pitch darkness, Link raises the Triforce of Wisdom in the air to reveal Ganon. After a quick recovery, the battle begins. And it's anticlimactic as hell. Ganon teleports around quickly and is invisible while doing so, which sounds intimidating, but even if you come in with half health, if you swing your sword wildly enough, he'll practically spawn into your sword thrusts and stun himself. Do this enough times and he'll turn brown, signifying that he's ready for the finishing blow. One silver arrow later, and Ganon explodes into dust, leaving behind the Triforce of Power. With this, Link takes both pieces of the Triforce into the next room where Zelda is being held. The two meet for the first time, and Zelda thanks Link for saving Hyrule and restoring peace to the land, ending Zelda 1. It's a journey unlike any other. This is a game that created and popularized several adventure game tropes and ideas that many might not even realize how much of an impact Zelda has had on their gaming life. So much of its design philosophy is carried into both future Zelda titles and the greater gaming sphere as a whole. The narrative, world, exploration, and music are all iconic pieces of gaming that have served to inspire and power so many creatives. But in that same vein, the cryptic and vague nature of the game serves as a massive barrier to entry that requires outside knowledge or a guide to ensure proper pace of play. I can absolutely understand the appeal of discovery, finding the hidden secrets of the world and the treasures within, charting a map yourself and getting immersed in the adventure of it all. But the reality is that without clearly defined markers, the game can quickly overwhelm and blend together. How was I supposed to know that this wall was bombable? How was I supposed to know that this bush was flammable? What in the game indicates I'm walking through the Lost Woods correctly? And why can I walk up to this specific wall without stairs? If you want to play this game, I do not recommend doing it without a guide of some sort. I will again recommend Zelda Dungeon, as their work on the series as a whole is amazing and deserves recognition. Without some sort of map or guidance of some sort, Zelda 1 becomes an entirely different, and in my opinion, worse experience. It was a great product of its time, a game that could generate discussion, community, and money with all the guides Nintendo produced to help kids, but now in an age where respect for the player's time is all the more valuable, Zelda 1 is a game that doesn't respect your time so much as your curiosity and patience. If you are at all curious and own a Nintendo Switch, I recommend you play the game through the Nintendo Switch Online service. It comes with save states and a rewind feature, making the game significantly easier to pick up and play, and lowering the tedium of game over significantly.
You know, Zelda 1 might not be the greatest game when you compare it to the lofty standards of gaming today, but when you think about what it spawned, what it inspired, the adventurous spirit that sparked so many games that we love and enjoy today, I think it'd be disrespectful to call this game anything but a legend. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Seth. I appreciate each and every one of you, and take care.